The city was alive with movement. Cars honked, people hurried across crosswalks, and the glass towers reflected the morning sun like shards of gold. Amid that bustle, a single figure stood out tall, confident, dressed in a tailored black suit that whispered success without needing to scream it. Her heels clicked against the marble sidewalk as she approached the grand entrance of the bank. The revolving glass doors gleamed, the kind of place that promised wealth and prestige. She had walked into countless boardrooms before, negotiated deals worth millions. And yet on this day she wasn't stepping inside as a CEO, but simply as a customer. The heavy door closed behind her with a thud. Inside, the atmosphere was different. Polished floors, chandeliers above, and quiet murmurs as bankers in pressed suits attended to their clients. A place of money, power, and control. She walked toward the counter, heads turned. A few eyes lingered longer than they should. She could hear the whispers that rose like smoke in the air. "Do you think she's lost?" One banker murmured under his breath, just loud enough for his colleague to hear. "Probably. Doesn't look like our kind of client," came the quiet chuckle in response. She ignored it. She had faced far worse in her climb to the top. With poise, she placed her folder of documents on the counter and gave a polite smile. "Good morning. I'd like to open a corporate account." The banker on the other side, the middle-aged man with slick back hair and an expensive tie, raised his brows. His eyes flicked from her face to her clothes, then back to her documents. He didn't even touch the folder. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. "Corporate account." His tone was laced with disbelief. "Are you sure you're in the right place, ma'am?" The words cut sharper than any blade. Around them, the quiet murmurs grew. Another banker leaned over to whisper to his colleague, a laugh escaping before he turned back to his computer screen. She straightened her shoulders, calm, steady. She had spent years learning never to show weakness in the face of disrespect. "Yes, I'm certain. I'd like to open the account today." The man chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Look, these kinds of accounts require significant deposits, business records, references. We don't handle casual requests. Maybe you'd be more comfortable at a community branch across town." The sting wasn't just in the words. It was in the way he looked at her, as if she didn't belong, as if her presence in that marble-floored lobby was a mistake. Behind her, someone cleared their throat, uneasy. A woman waiting in line gave a sympathetic glance, but no one spoke up. The banker pushed her folder back across the counter without opening it. "We're busy. Next customer." For a moment, the entire world seemed to pause. The weight of humiliation pressed against her chest. She felt the eyes, the judgment, the unspoken message, "You don't belong here." But beneath the quiet ache, something stronger stirred. Not anger, not yet, resolve. Her hand brushed against the folder, but instead of taking it, she let it rest there. She lifted her chin, her gaze locking with the banker's. "Are you certain," she asked softly, "that you don't want to take a second look?" The man smirked, dismissive, shaking his head. Quite certain. That was all she needed. She collected her documents with graceful precision, her face unreadable, her stride calm. Each step echoed against the marble as she walked away, the whispers trailing behind her like shadows. The heavy glass door swung open once again, and the sound of the city poured back in. She didn't look back, not yet. Her silence carried more power than any argument could as she stepped onto the sidewalk. The bustling world seemed to move around her, unaware of the storm that had just begun brewing. For them, it was just another ordinary morning. But for the bank behind her, it was the last morning they would ever operate the same way. Because this was not just a woman turned away. This was a CEO, a leader, a fighter, a woman with influence strong enough to shake the very foundation of the institution that had dared to humiliate her. And soon, they would find out exactly who they had refused. The clash had only just begun. Power isn't always worn on the outside. Sometimes, the most powerful person in the room is the one no one notices, at least not right away. Long before she walked into that bank, she had built herself from nothing. Raised in a small neighborhood where opportunity was scarce and doubt was constant, she learned early that hard work was her only currency. Nights spent studying under dim streetlights, mornings hustling to sell ideas no one believed in, those became the foundation of her empire. By the time she turned 30, she was a self-made CEO. Her company had offices in 3 countries, hundreds of employees, and contracts worth millions. Yet she never forgot the days when she was dismissed, underestimated, or ignored. That memory lived deep in her, shaping every move she made. And that's why she entered the bank the way she did. Not with an entourage, not with bodyguards or assistants carrying briefcases. She came in alone, dressed modestly, carrying only her documents. To everyone else, she looked like an ordinary woman. That was exactly the point. Inside her office earlier that week, she had explained her reasoning to her assistant. "They treat me well because they know my name," she said, her voice calm but sharp. "But what about the people who don't have influence? How do they get treated?" Her assistant frowned. "So, you're going in as just another customer?" She nodded. "Exactly. I need to see the truth with my own eyes." And now, standing in that pristine lobby, she was seeing it clearly. The whispers, the smirks, the way the banker pushed her folder away without a second glance. They didn't see a leader of industry. They didn't see a businesswoman with more assets than their entire branch. They saw only what they wanted to see, someone they could look down on. The arrogance was almost tangible. One employee leaned toward another, chuckling under his breath. Some people just think they can walk in here and demand things. Unreal. Another scoffed softly, adding, bet she doesn't even know what a corporate account requires. Each word struck like a reminder. Prejudice wasn't always loud or violent. Sometimes it was quiet, smug, and wrapped in professional smiles. But its sting was just as sharp. Still, she remained composed. Her silence wasn't weakness, it was strategy. She had no interest in arguing, no reason to prove herself to those who had already judged her. Let them laugh. Let them whisper. She was here to watch, to test, to remember, because soon, every smirk and every dismissive glance would matter. As she walked out of the bank that morning, the city air felt heavier, the noise louder. She carried her documents close, but what weighed more was the truth. She now carried. The staff didn't just lack professionalism, they lacked respect for the very people they were supposed to serve. And while she could have revealed her identity right then and there, she chose not to. This was no accident. It was an experiment, and the results had spoken louder than she could have imagined. Her driver opened the car door, but before stepping inside, she paused. Her reflection in the tinted glass stared back, calm, but burning with resolve. They think they've dismissed me, she whispered under her breath. But really, they've revealed themselves. She slipped into the car, her mind already racing with the next move. Because this wasn't just about her. It was about every person who had ever been turned away, dismissed, or made to feel small. And if this bank thought they could continue treating people that way, they were about to learn a very costly lesson. The plan was forming, the storm was building, and soon, the mockery behind that desk would meet a power they never saw coming. The stage was set for the clash to escalate, and it would, in ways none of them could predict. Humiliation doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it whispers, and sometimes, it laughs. The bank's air was thick with false politeness, the kind of atmosphere that looked elegant from the outside but stung with arrogance on the inside. She stood at the counter, her folder of documents neatly stacked, her voice calm, her presence commanding. Yet the faces on the other side of the desk told a different story. The banker she had first approached leaned back in his leather chair, arms crossed, smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth. His eyes scanned her like she was out of place. So, a corporate account, you said? His tone dripped with disbelief. Yes, she replied evenly, not breaking eye contact. I've brought everything required to open it today. He chuckled under his breath, shaking his head. You know, these accounts are a little advanced. They're not like your regular checking accounts. Are you sure you know what you're asking for? From the next desk over, another employee leaned in. She whispered something, muffling her laugh behind perfectly manicured nails. Maybe she thinks she can just walk in and play businesswoman, the woman said under her breath. The room wasn't silent anymore. It was alive with a quiet, poisonous energy. Each glance, each chuckle, each muttered word. They weren't denying her because of her documents. They were denying her because they had already decided she didn't belong. Her jaw tightened, but her expression stayed calm. Years in boardrooms had taught her the art of composure. I am fully aware of the requirements, she said softly, and I meet them. She slid the folder closer. Inside were company papers, financial records, tax documents, everything pristine, everything flawless. Proof of her empire, proof of her hard-earned success. But the banker didn't even look. He tapped the folder with a single finger, then pushed it back across the counter. I think you'd be better served at a smaller institution. Maybe a community bank down the street. We handle serious clients here. The sting was sharp. The insult wasn't even subtle, it was deliberate. Around her, customers waiting in line shifted uncomfortably. Some looked away, others stared, their eyes betraying the same thought. Did he really just say that? Her voice, steady as stone, cut through the tension. And what exactly makes you think I'm not a serious client? The banker smirked. Experience. I can tell when someone's in over their head. The arrogance was suffocating. His words weren't just dismissive, they were a dismissal of everything she had fought for. Every late night, every obstacle she had overcome, and then, it got worse. The manager of the branch, a tall man in a tailored suit, walked over after overhearing part of the exchange. He gave her one quick glance, then looked at the banker. What seems to be the problem here? She's insisting on opening a corporate account, the banker said, with mock politeness, but I explained to her that this might not be the right bank for her situation. The manager's lips curled into a thin smile as he turned to her. Ma'am, we appreciate your interest, but this bank deals with high-level clientele. You might feel more comfortable somewhere less demanding. Every word dripped with condescension. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The message was clear. You don't belong here. Leave. For the first time, her hand trembled slightly, not with fear, but with the weight of injustice pressing down. She steadied herself, lifting her chin. I'll ask you once more, she said, her voice cutting through the polished silence. "Do you want to see my documents?" The manager's response was a low chuckle. Then he turned to a security guard standing by the wall. "Could you escort this customer out? We have other clients to attend to." The room shifted. Every pair of eyes locked on her. The whispers grew louder. One woman gasped softly. Another man muttered under his breath, "That's not right." The security guard stepped forward, hesitant but obedient. He didn't grab her, but his presence alone was enough to make the humiliation complete. She looked at the manager, then at the banker, then at the guard.com/silent, her pride unbroken. Even in the face of public disgrace. With slow, deliberate movements, she picked up her folder, tucked it neatly under her arm, and turned toward the door. Each step echoed, heavy and sharp, across the polished floor. No words of defense, no argument, just silence. The kind of silence that unsettles, that lingers, that grows heavier with every second. And though she walked out quietly, her thoughts burned like fire. They thought they had dismissed her. They thought they had humiliated her. But in truth, they had planted something far more dangerous. Because humiliation, in the wrong hands, doesn't weaken, it transforms. By the time the door swung shut behind her, the seed had already been planted. A seed of justice, a seed of retribution. And soon, the same desk where they laughed and mocked would become the very place where they faced consequences. The bank thought the story had ended. In reality, it had only just begun. Sometimes, the harshest cruelty isn't in the insult, it's in the silence of those who watch and do nothing. As the banker's mocking words echoed through the lobby, the atmosphere shifted. The quiet elegance of the marble hall turned heavy, suffocating. Customers in line froze, clutching their purses, tapping their cards against their palms, pretending not to notice. But they had noticed. Every single one of them. A man in a gray suit leaned toward his wife, whispering, "That's not right." She tugged at his sleeve, urging him to stay quiet. A mother with her child shuffled uncomfortably, pulling her daughter closer as if shielding her from the ugliness unfolding just a few feet away. Eyes darted, whispers rose, but no one dared to step forward. Except one. An older gentleman, his hair silver but his voice steady, took a cautious step toward the counter. He wasn't wealthy, not powerful, just another customer, waiting his turn. But his conscience was louder than the fear in his chest. "Excuse me," he said firmly, addressing the manager. "She has every right to be here. You can't just dismiss her like that." The room stilled. Heads turned. For a moment, hope flickered. The manager's gaze snapped to him, icy and sharp. "Sir, this doesn't concern you. Please wait your turn." "But it does concern me," the man insisted, his voice stronger now. "I've been banking here for years, and I've never seen a customer treated this way." The banker at the desk gave a tight laugh, shaking his head. "Sir, you don't know the full situation. Please don't get involved." The older man's jaw clenched, but before he could say more, a security guard stepped between them, raising a hand as if to block him out. "Sir, please return to the line." The stranger's shoulders slumped. He wanted to fight. He wanted to stand tall, but the weight of authority pressed him back. With a final, helpless glance at her, he stepped away, retreating to his place in line. And that was it. His act of courage was swallowed by the silence of the room. She had watched it all, the hesitation, the whispers, the man's brave attempt to defend her, and the way it was shut down in seconds. The sting of injustice cut deeper, not just because of what the staff had done, but because of what everyone else hadn't. Her heart ached, but her face remained calm. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. She tucked her documents under her arm, her silence sharper than any argument she could have made. The customers watched as she turned, each step deliberate, heels clicking against the polished floor. Some looked away in shame. Others stared with quiet regret. No one spoke. At the door, she paused. Just for a moment, her hand rested on the glass handle. She glanced back, not at the bankers who mocked her, not at the guard who had been summoned, but at the faces of the silent witnesses. Her eyes met the older man's. For a heartbeat, there was an unspoken promise. "I see you. I won't forget your courage." Then she pushed the door open. The city's noise rushed in. The heavy door closed behind her with a thud that felt final. But outside, in the rush of honking horns and footsteps, her silence broke not aloud, but within. The determination that burned in her chest was unshakable. They thought they had humiliated her. They thought they had won. But in truth, they had only given her more reason to act, because this wasn't just about her anymore. It was about the silence of the crowd, about the stranger who tried to speak but was silenced, about every unseen witness who had ever swallowed injustice out of fear. As she walked toward her car, the reflection of the bank's golden logo shimmered in the glass tower above her. She didn't look back again. Her eyes forward, her mind sharp. She wasn't just walking away. She was walking toward something far greater. And soon, behind those marble walls, the same voices that mocked her would be silenced forever. Powerful moves are not made in the spotlight. They're made behind closed doors, where silence turns into strategy. Back at her headquarters, a sleek glass tower overlooking the city, the CEO walked into her private office. The space was quiet, almost too quiet, except for the muffled hum of the city below. But the moment she set her bag on the desk, the storm arrived. Her executive assistant, Maya, burst in, her voice tight with fury. "Tell me I didn't just hear correctly. They refused to serve you." The CEO didn't answer right away. She calmly removed her coat, hung it on the rack, and only then turned to face her. Her expression was cool, controlled so, unlike the fire burning in her team's eyes. Maya's fists clenched. "This is outrageous. You're their biggest client. They should be rolling out red carpets, not treating you like." She stopped herself, the anger in her throat too sharp to finish the sentence. A second later, the conference room doors opened, and the rest of the executive team filed in. Finance heads, legal advisors, senior managers. Word had spread fast, and they weren't here for a regular meeting. One by one, voices rose around the polished oak table. "This is unacceptable. They need to pay for this. We can't just ignore what happened. Not this time." The CEO sat at the head of the table, listening, her hands folded neatly, her face unreadable. She let them vent, let their anger swirl through the air, filling the room with heat. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was low but steady. "You're right. They do need to be held accountable." The room fell silent, all eyes on her. Then, with calm precision, she placed a single folder on the table. The golden logo of the very bank that humiliated her gleamed on the cover. "This bank," she said, tapping the folder, "isn't just any financial institution. They're one of our primary partners. Nearly 40% of their corporate portfolio comes from us." Gasps rippled through the room. One of the finance directors leaned forward, eyes wide. "You mean, they depend on our contracts to stay afloat?" The CEO gave a slow nod. "Exactly. Which means they've just disrespected the one client they cannot afford to lose." Maya's lips curved into a thin, dangerous smile. "So, what's our move?" The CEO rose from her chair, walking slowly to the massive window that stretched from floor to ceiling. The city lights shimmered in the glass, reflecting her silhouette, a woman calm, composed, yet radiating power. She spoke without turning around. "Moves like this aren't made in anger. They're made with precision. If I strike too hard, too fast, they'll call it revenge. But if I strike smart, it becomes justice." The legal advisor leaned in, intrigued. "What exactly are you planning?" The CEO turned back to face them, her eyes sharp. "First, we gather everything: contracts, agreements, every tie that binds them to us. I want leverage on the table before the end of tonight." The team scrambled into action, laptops flipping open, papers sliding across the table. The room buzzed with energy now, no longer outrage but purpose. As files appeared on the screen, the magnitude of their power became clear. The bank wasn't just a partner, they were practically dependent on her company's business. Loan agreements, shared investments, corporate projects underwritten entirely because of her signature. Maya shook her head in disbelief. They had no idea who they were messing with. The CEO allowed herself the faintest smile. "No, they didn't, but they're about to find out." The strategist in the corner, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. "If we pull everything at once, the branch won't just stumble, it'll collapse." "Are you sure you want to go that far?" The CEO's eyes hardened. "They didn't hesitate to humiliate me in public. Why should I hesitate to teach them what respect truly means?" Silence followed, heavy and electric. Then, as if a spark had lit the room, the team erupted again, this time with determination. Plans were sketched out on digital boards, calls placed, instructions given. Every second carried weight. Every detail sharpened the blade of what was about to come. The CEO remained still at the head of the table, watching her people move with loyalty and precision. She knew this was bigger than her pride. This was about setting a standard, reminding the world that dignity has a price, and those who trample it will pay in full. As the night stretched on, the office lights burned bright against the dark sky. Documents piled high, strategies finalized, and through it all, the CEO's calm voice guided them like a steady drumbeat. Finally, as the clock neared midnight, she closed the final folder and looked around the room. "Tomorrow," she said softly, "they'll realize the mistake they made wasn't refusing to serve me. It was underestimating me." The words hung in the air, powerful and final. Her team nodded, some with grim smiles, others with fire in their eyes. The decision had been made. The plan was in motion, and as the city outside slept, one truth was clear. When the sun rose, that bank's world would never be the same again. Some battles are fought with fists, others with silence, but the most devastating blows are delivered with a single phone call. The CEO sat alone in her office now, the hum of the city muted behind layers of glass. The night had dragged on, her team dispersing after preparing the groundwork. Only one final step remained. Her hand hovered over the sleek black phone on her desk. She didn't rush. This wasn't a call made in anger, it was a call made in power. And power, she knew, demanded patience. Finally, she dialed. The line rang once, twice. By the third ring, a sharp, professional voice answered. "Regional headquarters. This is Director Sullivan speaking." The CEO leaned back in her chair, her voice calm, steady. "Good evening, Director. I believe we need to talk about one of your branches." There was a pause, followed by the faint shuffle of papers. Of course, may I ask who's calling? The CEO allowed a small, deliberate pause. This is Evelyn Carter, CEO of Carter Global Enterprises. The silence that followed was almost tangible. Then, a nervous cough on the other end. Mrs. Carter, I wasn't expecting. She cut him off, her tone sharp but measured. I walked into one of your branches this afternoon. No entourage, no title. Just as a regular customer, what I received was not service. It was humiliation. The director's breath caught audibly. Humiliation. Her voice sharpened, the calm edge turning into steel. Yes, I was mocked, dismissed, told I should try a community bank down the street. And then, she let the weight of the moment hang in the air. Security was called to escort me out. The director scrambled for words. That's impossible. I who was the manager on duty. Please, give me the branch details immediately. But she wasn't finished. Her words sliced through his panic. You should know something else. Director, that branch holds contracts directly tied to my company. 40% of your corporate portfolio depends on Carter Global. And today, your employees treated the person responsible for that business as if she didn't even deserve to stand. In their lobby, the line went dead quiet. She could almost hear the man's heartbeat racing on the other end. Finally, his voice cracked. Mrs. Carter, this is absolutely unacceptable. I assure you, we will. We will look into this immediately. She leaned forward, her hand pressing against the polished desk. Looking into it isn't enough. I don't want excuses. I want accountability. The director stammered, desperate now. You have my word. Heads will roll. The manager, the staff, whoever was involved. They'll be dealt with before the week is over. The CEO's tone softened slightly, but her authority never wavered. You have 24 hours. If nothing is done, I'll ensure Carter Global pulls every contract from your bank. Permanently. The words hung like a blade. In the air, the director swallowed hard. Understood. Please, allow me to personally apologize on behalf of the institution. You have my personal line. Call me directly if anything is not handled to your satisfaction. She leaned back again, her voice cool. I don't need apologies. Director, I need change. You have 1 day to prove that your institution values its clients. If you fail, you'll find out how fast an empire can walk away. Click. She ended the call without waiting for his reply. The silence that followed was deafening, yet satisfying. For a moment, she sat still, her eyes reflecting the city skyline. Her pulse was steady. This wasn't revenge, was justice served cold, wrapped in authority and power. A faint knock at the door broke the quiet. Maya, her assistant, peeked in. Did you make the call? The CEO gave a slow nod. It's done. By tomorrow, they'll know exactly who they were dealing with. Maya smiled, though her eyes still burned with anger. They'll regret ever underestimating you. The CEO's gaze shifted back to the skyline, her reflection sharp against the glass. Her voice was calm, but her words carried fire. They already do. The night deepened, and though the city outside remained alive with noise, inside that office, the silence was filled with certainty. A storm was coming for the bank, and the woman they tried to humiliate was the one writing the forecast. Sometimes arrogance lingers the longest. Right before it crumbles. Inside the brightly lit branch, the staff were still buzzing with laughter. The incident from earlier, the woman who dared to walk in, dressed well but acting above her station, had become the joke of the afternoon. At the teller line, one employee chuckled, mimicking her voice. I want to open a corporate account, please. Did you see the look on her face when security walked her out? The others burst into laughter, their voices echoing across the marble floor. Even the manager, Mr. Dalton, leaned back in his chair with a smug grin. She probably works for a startup that sells candles online. A CEO. If she's a CEO, then I'm the President of the United States. They roared again. Oblivious to the storm forming above them, a customer sitting nearby shifted uncomfortably, lowering his eyes. The cruelty was clear, but no one dared speak. The staff's arrogance filled the air like smoke, suffocating any chance of decency. But then, the phone on the manager's desk rang. A sharp, urgent ring. Not the usual calls they were used to. Dalton waved his hand dismissively, still laughing. Probably some client calling to beg for a loan we'll never approve. He grabbed the receiver. This is Dalton, branch manager. How can I? The voice on the other end cut him like a blade. Cold, stern, all business. Mr. Dalton, this is regional headquarters. Effective immediately, your branch is scheduled for a full surprise inspection. Assemble your staff. Do not leave the building. We will arrive shortly. Dalton froze. The color drained from his face. He stammered. I'm sorry. Did you say inspection? The voice gave no comfort. Yes, and Mr. Dalton, this comes directly from the regional director himself. Prepare all files, accounts, and staff reports. We expect full compliance. No excuses. Click. The line went dead. The laughter died instantly. The room fell into silence, broken only by the faint hum of the overhead lights. An uneasy murmur rippled through the staff. What's going on? Whispered one teller. Why now? We've never had an inspection out of the blue like this. Dalton slammed the phone down. his voice sharp but shaky. Quiet, don't panic. It's just routine, probably nothing. But his hands trembled as he adjusted his tie. He knew better. Routine inspections were scheduled months in advance. Surprise inspections only happened when something went terribly wrong. Another employee muttered, almost too softly to hear. You think it's about her? The room stiffened. Everyone's mind flashed back to the woman they mocked, the one they'd tossed out without hesitation. Dalton's jaw tightened, but he couldn't hide the crack in his confidence. Don't be ridiculous. She was nobody important. Yet his voice betrayed him as the staff scrambled to shuffle papers, organize files, and rehearse their excuses. The atmosphere grew thick with dread. Their arrogance had vanished, replaced with a gnawing fear that something larger than themselves had just been set into motion. One teller leaned toward another, her whisper trembling. What if she wasn't nobody? What if she really was who she said she was? The question hung in the air like a curse, unanswered, growing heavier with each second. Dalton tried to rally his team, but his words carried no conviction. Just get everything in order. When they get here, we'll smile, we'll cooperate, and it'll all blow over. Got it? But even as he spoke, the glass doors reflected his pale face, and deep down, every staff member knew the truth. Something was coming, and it was coming for them. Outside, the city went on with its usual rhythm. Cars honked, people crossed the streets, unaware that inside this branch, panic had begun to take root. What began as cruel laughter only hours before had transformed into nervous whispers, and with every passing second, the weight of their earlier arrogance pressed down harder. For the first time, all day, the staff of the bank were not in control. They were prey, waiting for the predator they couldn't yet see. And little did they know, the woman they humiliated would soon walk back into their world, not as a customer, but as the storm itself. Some truths don't need to be shouted. They arrive in silence, and shake the ground beneath everyone who hears them. The morning sun streamed through the glass walls of the branch. But inside, the atmosphere was far from warm. The staff shifted uneasily, papers shuffled, and the nervous tapping of pens filled the air. The surprise inspection had everyone on edge. And then, the doors opened. The sound was ordinary, just the soft click of glass hinges, but what followed was anything but ordinary. Walking through those doors was the very woman they had mocked. No longer in disguise, no longer quiet. She wasn't just a customer, now she was the storm they had invited. Evelyn Carter entered with calm precision. Her tailored suit carried power in every stitch, her presence commanding the room before she even spoke. Beside her walked 2 men in dark suits, the regional executives themselves. Their expressions were cold, their eyes locked straight ahead. The staff froze. The color drained from faces that only yesterday were lit with arrogance. A silence swept through the lobby, so heavy it seemed to press down on the walls. Even the customers waiting sensed something extraordinary was unfolding. Dalton, the manager, stumbled forward, his smile awkward, his palms clammy. Good morning, welcome to. But his words faltered as Evelyn's eyes met his, calm, steady, unforgiving. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her silence alone said everything. The regional director spoke instead, his voice sharp. This branch is under immediate review. Every complaint, every incident, every staff report will be examined. Effective now. Gasps rippled across the room. The tellers exchanged nervous glances, whispers breaking out in hushed tones. Dalton forced a laugh, desperate. Surely this isn't necessary, Director. We run a very professional branch here. Isn't that right, team? But the team didn't answer. Their eyes darted between Evelyn and the executives. Their silence betrayed them. Evelyn stepped forward at last. Her heels clicked against the marble floor, each step deliberate. Echoing through the dead quiet lobby, she stopped in front of Dalton. Her voice was calm, even gentle, but laced with steel. Yesterday, I walked into this branch as a client. I asked for service. Instead, I was mocked, belittled, and escorted out as if I didn't belong here. Dalton's forced smile crumbled. Mrs. Carter, I had no idea. She didn't let him finish. Of course you didn't, because you didn't care. You judged me by what you thought you saw, not who I am. The staff stood frozen, their earlier laughter now a ghost, haunting them. The customers in the lobby stared wide-eyed, realizing they were witnessing a reckoning. The regional executive stepped forward. Mrs. Carter is not only a client, she is the CEO of Carter Global Enterprises, one of this bank's largest partners. Her company is responsible for nearly half of the corporate accounts managed here. The words hit like thunder. Dalton's knees seemed to buckle. The tellers' mouths fell open in shock. Evelyn's eyes swept across the staff, her tone cutting through the silence. So tell me, is this how you treat all your clients, or just the ones who look like me? No one answered. No one dared. The quiet stretched on, suffocating. Then, Evelyn spoke again, her words slow and deliberate. You had an opportunity to show professionalism. You chose arrogance. You had a chance to serve with dignity. You chose humiliation. Now, you will face the consequences of those choices. The staff trembled. Dalton tried once more, his voice shaking. Please, Mrs. Carter, if we could just... Put this behind us, but Evelyn raised a hand, silencing him. You put me out of this branch yesterday. Today, I put the spotlight on you. Let's see how you handle it. The regional director nodded firmly, already pulling out documents. This branch will be audited immediately. Staff suspensions are likely. Terminations inevitable. The room felt colder than ice. Every arrogant smirk from yesterday had melted into fear. Every mocking laugh was now replaced by the pounding of guilty hearts. And Evelyn, she stood tall, her eyes unflinching. She hadn't raised her voice once. She hadn't needed to. Sometimes, true power is not about the loudest roar, but the calmest presence in the storm. As the staff lowered their eyes in shame, Evelyn turned toward the glass doors. Her voice carried one last line, meant for everyone in the room to hear. Yesterday, you thought I was invisible. Today, you see me clearly. And tomorrow, you'll remember what happens when dignity is dismissed. She walked out, leaving silence in her wake. But the silence wasn't empty, it was heavy, full of fear, regret, and the looming shadow of what was still to come. Some endings arrived like whispers, but others crashed down like thunder. The lobby was frozen in silence. The weight of what Evelyn had just revealed still lingered in the air. The staff who once smirked and sneered now stood pale, their breaths shallow. Customers, wide-eyed, leaned forward in their chairs, sensing history in the making. Evelyn Carter took a single step forward. Her heels clicked against the polished marble floor, the sound echoing like a gavel, striking down. Judgment. Her gaze swept across the line of employees. Calm, sharp, unflinching. Let's not waste time, she began. Her voice was steady, every word laced with quiet power. This is no longer about banking. This is about integrity. Dalton, the manager, swallowed hard. His throat worked nervously as Evelyn turned her eyes on him first. You, she said, her tone cutting like glass. The one who told me I didn't look like I belonged here. Do you remember those words? Dalton stammered. Mrs. Carter, I didn't mean. She raised a hand, silencing him. You didn't mean what? That I wasn't worthy. That I wasn't important enough for your time. Her voice deepened, each word weighted with memory. A manager sets the tone. And yesterday, you set yours loud and clear. Dalton's lips parted, but no excuse would come. His body trembled under her gaze. Effective immediately, she continued. Your position as branch manager is terminated. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Dalton's face collapsed, his forced confidence dissolving into raw fear. But Evelyn didn't pause. Her eyes shifted to the teller who had mocked her clothes. And you, she said, her voice lower now, colder. You laughed as I stood at your counter. You smirked as though dignity was beneath you. Do you recall that moment? The teller's face burned red. She clutched the edge of the desk, voice shaking. I was just joking, ma'am. It wasn't serious. Evelyn stepped closer. Her presence was magnetic, unyielding. A joke. Humiliation is not a joke. Discrimination is not a joke. And today, the consequences are not a joke. The teller lowered her head, tears threatening. Your employment here, Evelyn declared, is terminated. Effective now. The weight of those words fell like iron. Whispers spread through the customers, some nodding in approval, others covering their mouths in shock, but none dared interrupt. One by one, Evelyn turned to each staff member, the security guard who had ushered her out. You enforced exclusion instead of protection. Terminated. The assistant who rolled her eyes and muttered insults under her breath. You poisoned the air of this workplace. Terminated. The young teller who looked away when she asked for help. Silence in the face of injustice is still injustice. Terminated. Each name spoken, each judgment delivered, was like a blade cutting through the arrogance that had filled this room only a day before. And with every decision, the branch shrank smaller, weaker, quieter. Dalton finally broke, falling to his knees. Please, Mrs. Carter. Evelyn, this is my career. I've given years to this bank. Her eyes didn't soften. And yet, in the one moment that counted, you gave nothing to the people you swore to serve. His voice cracked. We can change. We can learn. She shook her head slowly. Change begins with respect. You never gave it. And now, it's too late. The regional director stepped forward, holding a clipboard. His voice was stern, final, by the authority of headquarters, and on the recommendation of Mrs. Carter. All listed employees of this branch are hereby dismissed for misconduct and violation of company policy. The announcement thundered through the lobby. It was official. The staff stood hollow, their careers crumbling before them. Some cried silently. Others stood in stunned silence, staring at the floor, unable to meet Evelyn's eyes. And then applause. It started softly, from a customer sitting in the waiting area. Then, another joined, and another. Within seconds, the lobby filled with clapping. Not for the pain of those being fired, but for the justice, sharp and clear, that had finally been delivered. Evelyn turned toward the crowd, her expression calm, though her eyes carried the weight of everything that had just unfolded. This isn't about revenge, she said, her voice carrying strength and grace. This is about accountability, about showing that dignity has no price, and justice cannot be ignored. The applause grew louder. echoing against the glass walls. Evelyn allowed herself one final glance at the staff. "You thought this branch was untouchable," she said quietly, "but arrogance always has a cost. And today you paid it." With that, she turned and began walking toward the doors, the sound of clapping still filling the air behind her. But as she reached the glass, the applause faded into silence. For what came next was something even greater. Some storms end when the skies clear, but others leave ripples that stretch far beyond the horizon. By the next morning, Evelyn Carter's story was everywhere. News anchors repeated the headline with urgency. A local bank branch has been shut down following allegations of discrimination against one of the nation's leading black CEOs. Clips of shaky phone footage by stunned customers during the confrontation circulated online, spreading like wildfire. The image of Evelyn, yet unshakable as she stood in the middle of that lobby, became a symbol of strength overnight. On social media, the reaction was explosive. Hashtags calling for accountability trended across platforms. Videos dissected the arrogance of the staff, while others praised Evelyn's poise in the face of humiliation. Thousands of comments poured in. "This is what justice looks like. She stood tall for all of us who've been ignored. Respect is not optional." The bank's corporate headquarters could no longer remain silent. By noon, a carefully worded press release was issued. The spokesperson appeared on television, reading from a statement, "We sincerely apologize to Mrs. Evelyn Carter and to the community at large. The behavior displayed at the branch name location does not reflect the values of our institution. Effective immediately, we are implementing new mandatory training across all branches to ensure respect, equity, and inclusion are at the forefront of our service." But apologies, though polished, could not erase the truth. The damage was done. Their reputation, once unblemished, was now cracked in the public eye. And Evelyn Carter was the reason why. Inside her office, Evelyn sat at her desk, scrolling through the flood of messages. Employees from other branches, strangers from around the world, even young women who wrote, "You give me hope that one day, I can stand where you stand." Her assistant entered quietly. "The board is ready for your call, ma'am." Evelyn nodded, her mind focused. When the screen lit up with the faces of the bank's directors, their expressions were sober. "Mrs. Carter," one began, "on behalf of the board, we regret what you endured. We are committed to working with you to prevent this from ever happening again." Evelyn's gaze was steady. Commitment is not enough. Policies must change, training must be real, and accountability must be ongoing. The directors exchanged nervous glances. Then, one by one, they nodded. "Agreed," the chairman said at last. "We will expand diversity and sensitivity programs company-wide, and we'd like you to oversee their development." Evelyn leaned back slightly, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then she spoke, her voice firm yet hopeful. "Good, because what happened to me is not just about me. It's about every customer who walks through your doors and deserves respect. That's where change begins." Meanwhile, another story was quietly unfolding. In the middle of the chaos, the day before, there had been one voice of kindness. A customer, an ordinary stranger who had stepped forward, challenging the staff when no one else would. A single act of courage that had kept Evelyn from standing completely alone. That afternoon, Evelyn arranged to meet him at a small cafe downtown. When he arrived, still looking slightly overwhelmed by the media whirlwind, Evelyn stood to greet him with a warm smile. "You probably don't realize it," she said softly, "but you changed everything yesterday. When they laughed, you spoke up. When they tried to silence me, you stood beside me. That kind of courage matters." The man shook his head. "I just did what anyone should have done." Evelyn's eyes softened. "And yet, too many people don't. That's why it meant so much." She slid a small envelope across the table. He hesitated, opening it to reveal a scholarship fund in his name designed to help underprivileged youth pursue higher education. His eyes widened in disbelief. "This is, for me." "No," Evelyn replied gently. "It's because of you." A reminder that one voice, even in the smallest moment, can create change. The man's throat tightened, emotion rising. He nodded, unable to find words. As days passed, the aftershock of that confrontation continued to ripple outward. The branch remained closed, its doors locked and windows dark. New training programs were announced with urgency, not as a gesture, but as a demand for survival in the face of public pressure. But for Evelyn, the greatest victory wasn't in the firings or the policies. It was in the message that now echoed far beyond that bank's marble walls. A message that discrimination carries a cost, that silence is complicity, and that dignity, once defended, can never be forgotten. The city moved on, but the lesson remained. For Evelyn Carter, this was never about vengeance, it was about transformation. And as she prepared for the next chapter of her journey, she knew one truth above all: storms may shake the world, but it is in their aftershock that real change begins. Power. It's a word that echoes through boardrooms and bank vaults, often mistaken for money, titles, or influence. But for Evelyn Carter, power meant something far deeper: The sun was setting outside her office windows, streaks of gold spilling across the skyline. Her staff had gathered for one last meeting, the tension of recent days still heavy in the air. Yet tonight felt different. Tonight wasn't about strategy or retaliation. It was about reflection. Evelyn rose from her chair, her presence commanding but calm. The room quieted instantly. She looked at the faces around her, people who had stood by her side, furious when she was mocked, loyal when she chose dignity over rage. Her voice carried with steady warmth. What happened in that bank was not just about me. It wasn't about a balance sheet, or a partnership contract, or even the loss of a branch. It was about something much greater: respect, humanity, justice. She let the words hang for a moment. The silence was heavy, yet purposeful. True power, she continued, is not the ability to fire people on the spot. It's not measured in how many companies you own, or how many zeros sit in your account. True power is the ability to stand tall when others try to make you small. It's the ability to demand dignity, not just for yourself, but for everyone watching who's been told they're less. Her assistant leaned forward, eyes shining. Ma'am, when you walked out of that bank, you didn't look angry. You looked determined, almost like you knew what was coming next. Evelyn smiled faintly. Because I did. Their laughter may have stung, but it didn't define me. I wasn't walking out defeated. I was walking out holding something they could never take from me, my self-respect, and that is priceless. The team exchanged glances. Moved by her words, Evelyn's tone sharpened slightly, cutting through the stillness. Let me make this clear. Discrimination has consequences, whether it's in a bank lobby, a boardroom, or a street corner. Every act of disrespect, every attempt to strip someone of their worth, it leaves a scar. But when we stand against it, when we refuse to bend, we turn those scars into strength. She paced slowly across the room, her heels clicking against the polished floor. Each step carried weight. Each sentence felt like a lesson etched into stone. Some will say money is power. Others will say control is power. But I tell you, this respect is power. Justice is power. And the kind of power built on dignity, that can never be stolen, no matter how hard anyone tries. For a moment, no one spoke. The staff sat still, their eyes locked on her. Some blinked back tears, others nodded silently. Then Evelyn walked to the window, looking out at the city lights flickering awake. Her reflection stared back at her, a woman who had endured insult, yet emerged stronger. Her voice softened now, intimate, almost like she was speaking not just to her staff, but to everyone beyond those walls. Let this be our reminder. Titles fade, money comes and goes, but character and courage, that is what remains. If my story teaches anything, it's this. You don't need to shout to prove your worth. Sometimes, the greatest statement you can make is to stand in silence and let your actions do the talking. The room exhaled, as though every word had lifted something from their shoulders. One junior staffer, hesitant but brave, raised her hand. Mrs. Carter, what do we do now? After all this, Evelyn turned, her eyes bright with certainty. Now we lead. We lead by example. We make sure no one who comes through our doors ever feels what I felt in that branch. And when people look at us, they don't just see success, they see integrity. That's how we change the world. The words settled deep, like seeds planted in fertile soil. Outside, the city buzzed on, unaware of the quiet revolution brewing in that office. But those inside knew they had witnessed something profound. And as Evelyn stepped away from the window, she knew too. The story that began with mockery, humiliation, and silence would not end there. It had transformed into a lesson that would echo far beyond her own life. Because real power is moral power, the kind that inspires, uplifts, and endures. And with that, Evelyn Carter closed her eyes for a moment, letting the weight of the day dissolve into the stillness of night. The battle was over, but the message would live on forever.